Hello and good morning. I'm up early and I thought I would make a tutorial for you and let's just see what we can get done today. Um, so if you follow us, you have seen that we just had a ladies' tea at our church, and I hosted a table. So I made some of the decorations, and I gave every woman a little ornament as a gift and a memento of the evening. And I got some good feedback on them. And then my mom asked me to make one for her sister who hasn't been feeling well and who loves sheep. So I thought, you know what? Let's make one of these for my Aunt Linda. Hi, Linda. Feel better soon. And let's make one of those, and then I will just show you how I did it because maybe you would like to make some of these for your tree or as gifts because they are really pretty sweet, aren't they? So I'm going to walk you through this process. What I use is an IOD mold, and this is the Village Market Mold. It has a cow, a sheep, and a pig, and I've made all of these, but the sheep really is my favorite. I love this little sheep. So I use that, and these are available. And then I used for the little holly sprig that's on here. I used, this is a past Christmas release. It's been retired, so if you don't already have one, you could use something else, a different mold, or even a little sprig of holly that you just put on there. And if you buy one from a craft store, so this is called Holly Lane, and if you have one of these, good for you. These are pretty beautiful. They have some pine cones, but I'm just going to use this little sprig of holly right here. And when you're using your IOD molds, you can use several different mediums in them. And I use a few different things. What I used for this sheep is the amazing casting resin from Hobby Lobby. I think you can order this online from Amazon as well. It comes in 2 parts. I chose that for a couple of reasons. First of all, I wanted something that wasn't going to break if it fell from the tree. And then the other reason is because of these legs. If you used something that's brittle, I'm pretty sure that those legs would pop off of there when it was bumped or dropped or anything. So I do think resin, it's also nice and light. So it makes a pretty nice ornament actually. So let's get started. Let me show you how I made this cute little ornament. So let's get started. The first thing we need to do is cast our little sheep and our little holly. And I'm going to mix up 40 grams. I always use one of these little scales because you really want to make sure you can mix up any amount that you want, but you have to have equal amounts of the A and B liquid. So I am going to do 40 grams, and so that'll be 20 of each. And what I like to do, I always shake it up a little bit. What I like to do is put my A in the container I'm going to be pouring from, and go ahead and tare my scale. And so if I want 40 grams, I'll need 20 of each part. So let me go ahead and pour this. And I got just a little bit more than I needed. So I used one of these little pipettes that I could just get a package. They're inexpensive, but it helps me when I'm pouring there. Now, see, I got exactly at 20 grams, and that's what I wanted. So I'm going to set that aside. And now in a separate container, I'm going to do the part B. And this one seems like it separates out a little bit more. So I like to shake that up a little bit better. And then in a separate container, I also, I find resin's kind of messy to work with sometimes. Honestly, not my favorite to work with. I do like the product. It's a great product, but I just bought these little, I don't know, they're just little disposable cups that make it a little bit easier to, I feel like I like to throw things away a lot when I use resin. So I'm also going to do 20 grams of this, and this one pours a little, it's a little more fluid than the other. And again, you see I overshot. So now I want to use a different pipette to pull that out. You don't want to mix the two. And there we go. Now we have exactly 20 grams of part B. All right, so now I have those measured out, and we're going to mix them together. Here's my part A, part B. They are perfectly equal amounts, or as perfect as I could make them. And what we're going to do, I'm going to pour part B into part A, and then excuse me, and then I'm going to mix this up for 30 seconds. That's what the instructions say. I'm kind of eyeballing it, and I'll kind of show you what I personally do. Although I use a timer as often as I can, but right now I'm using my camera, so it's kind of inconvenient. But I can show you another way that you can kind of see what's happening here. So I'm going to pour part B into part A. And then I'm going to start mixing it, and you can kind of see it gets really cloudy. You see that? Hopefully you can. And I'm going to keep mixing. I'm scraping the bottom. I'm scraping the sides. We want that to really mix up nicely. And you do have to move a little bit fast because I think you have about 2 minutes of working time with the resin. And that looks pretty good to me. I'm going to go ahead and start pouring. So I'm just filling up this sheep, getting down here on the legs. And that looks pretty good to me. I overflowed a little, but that's okay. That won't be a problem. I can get that off once we unmold it. And now I'm also going to do this little holly sprig. Make sure that little stem gets filled in. That looks pretty good to me. So this, I just leave my little stick in there and I let that harden. And Then once it's all the way hard, it's kind of easy to pop that out and clean this cup. So you do get a few uses out of this cup, but it is essentially disposable. But I can usually get quite a few uses out of it before I throw it away. This little stick is actually one of the transfer sticks from IOD. I always save those, and I find they come in useful for resin. They're useful for stirring paint. I just come up with a lot of different ways to use those. So now we're just waiting to see this resin get hard. And I'm leaving the camera on because I kind of want you to see it. It's kind of cool. You'll start to see kind of a little white area, and it'll start in the center of the mold, and then it will gradually move to the whole mold. It's also getting a little bit hot, so there's a little bit of heat coming off of these. There it goes. And it seems to always happen in the larger pores first. As you can see, that sheep is really moving, and the holly, we can't see anything yet. So I'm sure there's a great scientific explanation for that, but I don't know what it is, and now it just feels a little magic to me. So I enjoy watching. You can see the holly is starting to set up now. So we will leave these just for a few minutes until we can remove them from the mold. Let's take a look at how these are doing. When I pick it up, I can feel that this one is no longer hot. I can touch it. It hasn't been too long. I didn't really time it, but it's been a few minutes. So I'm just going to try it, and I don't think this one's quite ready. It doesn't want to pop quite out quite yet. So let's give that a few more minutes. I'm actually just going to set these aside. And now I'm going to show you the painting process. And I like to use acrylic paints. There's a lot of different brands. This is Americana. This is Craft Smart. This is Delta. And over the years, I've bought quite a few of these, and they do last a long time, and they come in a huge amount of colors. I think the best way to get started is that you can usually find a variety pack, and I think this brand came from a variety pack that I bought probably at Hobby Lobby a few years back. So the packaging might look a little bit different today, but there are, I don't know, maybe 20 different bottles in there of kind of basic colors. Now, the great thing about paint is that you can always mix your own colors, and I will do a little bit of mixing today for this particular project. Probably you could go buy the exact color that you wanted, but I just find it easier to go ahead and mix up the colors. So for the base color of the sheep, I'm going to mix this, and I got paint on here, so I don't know what the color is. Oh, it's dark gray. This dark gray with this fawn color, which is just kind of a tan. And when I mix those together, I kind of liked that look. So I will put in, I'm going to have to buy some more of this color. So I put in a pretty good amount because this is going to do the whole sheep. So the first thing that I do is when I'm painting the molds, I do play with color. It took me a couple of tries to get exactly the look that I wanted. So I usually will pick a dark color, and then let me pull the sheet over here for you. I'll usually put a dark color all over the mold, and then come back and dry brush. I did some shading here and some highlighting on here. That's usually how I do it. You can do it the other way. You can paint it a light color and come back with a dry brush with some dark colors. You kind of have to play around with it a little bit until you get exactly the look that you want. But let me put just a little bit of this fawn color in here, and then I just mix it up. And I think maybe I used a darker gray because this looks pretty light. I'm just going to play a little bit. I think I'll add a little bit of black to darken that up just a teeny bit. And this is how I mix colors. I just kind of play, add some different colors until I get something that I like. And what I'm looking for on this particular one is kind of a brownish gray color. I'm going to add a little more of that fawn now. Yeah, that's looking more like what I wanted. Sorry about that noise. It's probably a terrible noise. All right, so that is a good base color for my lamb. All right, so now this one is ready to pop out. Did you see how easily that released when I pulled the side? That's how you know it's ready. I always like unmolding. It's really fun. I'm not the only one. So look at all the amazing detail in this mold. Still a little bit soft, but see how I over poured here? Now it's pretty easy for me to get that off of there. And if it were a little bit harder, I could probably just honestly just break it off with my fingers. It is still a little bit soft, and I don't want to pull that stem off of my holly leaf. So I'm just going to use a little X-Acto blade. And now we have our holly leaf. Let's set that there. The sheep may not be ready yet because it is bigger. And I'm mostly worried about these little legs. So let's give him a little bit longer to set up. So I can show you how I painted the holly leaf. And I used kind of a combination of green. I had this green, but I wanted it to be a little bluer. Doesn't take much. So I just added, this is ocean blue, and you can try different combinations of colors and just, it's a great thing about painting is that you can get really personal with it and make it match your decor or your personal taste, just whatever you like. So let me mix these together. Or you could just buy the green that you like if you, because when you go and you don't buy them in the multi-pack, there's a really big section in the craft store that has all of those paints. And I think I'm liking this. I think that looks pretty good. That's going to work well for my holly leaf. So it does not take a very fancy brush for this type of painting. In fact, getting something that's a little bit, a little scruffy actually works pretty well for dry brushing. So I'm going to paint this holly leaf with this. It's just a flat brush. This is nothing fancy. You really don't need a fancy brush for this type of painting because you want something that you can get down in these little spaces. And when it comes to the dry brushing part, it doesn't need a fine edge to it. You'll see as I go ahead. But let me go ahead and paint this leaf. And I don't really get fancy with these. I just go for even coverage over the whole, at least all the green part. I don't paint the berries yet. I leave those. And when you're painting a mold, don't forget that you want to get the sides as well, because those are going to show. And for this one, I actually even painted the back because once you glue it on the sheep, a little bit of it peeks out on the side. So I just went ahead and painted the whole leaf, even on the back here. And for the berries, I just used this terracotta color. I don't know, I didn't really want a red. I thought it was kind of a nice, soft color for the berries. And this color does require a couple of coats. You don't have to be perfectly exact when you're painting these molds. You want to be a little careful not to get too sloppy, but it's a very forgiving you don't have to be super fussy with all your edges. There we go. So I think our sheep is ready now to unmold, and see how easily it'll pop. When it's ready, it pops really easily. We're going to be a little careful with these legs because they're probably still a little bit soft. Oh, nice that I don't even have to trim this off because it hit that micro rim. Look at that. So that's what they look like before we start adding the paint. And this is what we're going to create, or pretty closely. So the first thing to do on this is kind of like we did with the holly leaf. We're just going to cover this whole sheep with a layer of this gray slash tan kind of a color. And I'm using a little bit larger of a brush just because this is a bigger area. And nothing fancy here. We just want to get a full coverage on our sheep. So once again, making sure we get down into those little indentions and making sure we get the edges. I get all these little parts. All right, so we'll need to let this dry, and acrylic paint does dry pretty quickly, although because there is so much detail, it takes a little while for all these little crevices to dry. So we're gonna let him dry, and then I'll pop on probably just a little half coat to knock out. This actually covered pretty well, but I might add just a little bit here and there to make sure we have nice full coverage on it. For the back of the mold, I actually did sort of a black, and then I just wrote on here Ladies Tea 2025 because, again, I wanted this to be kind of a memento for my aunt. I don't think I'll put a message on the back, maybe, but I don't think so. But probably just paint hers this dark color, just so the back of it doesn't look weird if you happen to see the back of it on the tree. And for this, I'm using this glorious gold. There are a lot of gold paints out there. I, I kind of like this one because it's honestly not very expensive, and it doesn't have a weird smell. I don't know. It just seems pretty simple to me. You can definitely get fancier ones, but this one, I really like what I get. So you might try it. I'm just going to take a very tiny amount. And now I'm going to make sure that my brush is nice and dry. This is the dry brushing technique that I will be using on the lamb. But I think it'll be nice to show this because you can see the effect pretty quickly on here. So this is pretty much dry. I am going to take just a small amount of this gold, and I just use a piece of cardboard, and you want to brush off a lot of that paint so that your brush is essentially dry. That's what you're looking for. And then you're going to just very lightly brush, and what you really want to be trying to do is hitting all the raised areas. So you want most of that color to show through the pretty green that we made, but you want your dry brush to kind of highlight the detail of the casting itself. The IOD does such a good job adding all the detail, and you can add as little or as much as you would like, but I do think this is the best method for really showing that amazing detail on these molds. I love how that looks. And I get a little heavier on the berries here. There's not a lot of detail on them, but I just think that gold looks nice on there. All right, I think our little holly berries are ready. Now, I don't use a sealer on the acrylic paint. Doesn't really need it. I suppose you could if you wanted to. I would probably do something fairly matte because, I don't know, I kind of think these look maybe like they're made of wood or maybe paper mache. They just have kind of a rustic, old world kind of charm to them. And so shiny just wouldn't really fit that, I don't think. So this one is mostly dry. I am going to go back in, just rinsing out my brush here. I am going to go back in, and there's a couple of little lighter areas. I just want to get this pretty even. Get his little hoofs down here, or whatever you call those. All right, I like that. It's nice and even. Let's let that dry. So the rest of this sheep will be that dry brushing technique. And I like, even though this is a white sheep, I guess, I don't know, but even though it's white, I did actually use a couple of colors of white. So I first use a dry brush of buttermilk all over the sheep, and then I do this shading around them, just to kind of give them a little bit of dimension. And then I come back in actually with some white, just to make this fur pop just a little bit more. And I think that's everything. It's pretty simple. It looks a little more detailed, but it is pretty simple. So let me grab my shading color. So I think this sheet may be a little more gray than the ones that I did before, but that's okay. I still think it's going to look awesome. So we're going to take this buttermilk and we're going to dry brush this all over the whole sheep. And again, you want to make sure that your brush is nice and dry. Just give a little bit on your brush, and then use your cardboard to kind of get that even through your brush, and knock off any of the extra, because you do want it to be mostly dry. And I'm just lightly going over the surface of this mold. I don't want it to get down into the grooves. I want it to just really show off that beautiful detail. Look at that lovely fur. Won't that look nice? I really enjoy this particular part of the process. And I even do his face. There's even some detail and texture on his face. And I use a really dry brush. Like, it feels like there's almost no paint on here at all. Oh, and he has a little spot up here on his top of his head we want to get. And then we want to okay, and let's also make sure again that we get those edges. And get all this here. Over here. This little mouth. And then I also do his legs. There's really some nice detail here around the hooves. We want to make that pop a little bit. As you can see, I barely have any paint left on my brush. So there's our first coat of dry brushing, and he is going to be a little more gray. That base coat is a little more gray than the other, but I like it. I think it's going to look really nice. Okay, so I'm going to clean out my brush, and now I'm going to add this shading area. I do around the tail, around the face and the ear, on these hooves. And I use this raw umber. And I'm going to use a couple of different brushes. I'm going to go back to my smaller flat brush. And then I'm also going to use a really thin brush here. That's going to do my shading in his ears and things like that. So my brush is nice and dry. Just picking up a little bit of that raw umber. And then for this part, I just do kind of, there's not a super defined area here where his leg is, but I just kind of draw it out here and then bring it down here on the belly. I do the same thing back here where the legs are. Just kind of give his belly a little bit of definition. And with the dry brushing, you can just kind of keep coming back in. It's better to do multiple layers than to try to put a bunch of paint on at one time. You see how that's starting to look a little more defined. I also just kind of went between each set of legs here. Add a little definition here. Hopefully you can see how little paint I'm using to do this. And then I also did here on the tail a little bit. Just kind of wanted to hit this area a little bit. And just kind of keep playing with it till you like it. I'm liking this. And then I did a little bit with this brush, just right here where the shaggy fur kind of starts, and up here where his ears are. Now I'm going to switch to my thin brush to add some of this detail. So here where the tail is, I like to go down into that spot. And this one is not as much of a dry brush, although you do want to be a little careful not to get too much paint on your brush, but just want to get down into that so that you can see that there's a tail there a little bit more. The same thing with the ear. I really get down here into this ear. And his mouth. And his nose. And you can play with this as much as you want, or as little as you want. And then I came back here along on the smooth side of this little line with my small brush, just to kind of put some shadowing here. And I did his eye a little bit. The eyes on the molds are sometimes a little bit tricky. This sheep's not too bad because I didn't really get super detailed on how I did the eye. Okay, so we're starting to get some detail here. Also down here on the hooves, I liked to get some of this brown so that the hooves are mostly this brown color. All right, starting to get some shading. And clean my brushes, and now as I'm looking at it, I think I want to add a little bit more of that buttermilk before I do the white. I think I was a little light on it, so I'm going to add a little bit more. I think we want to just add a little bit more here. Yeah, I think it needed a little more of that light color. Okay, I like that. That's better. Clean my brush off, and now I'm going to go back to, I'm going to add the white. And this is oyster white. I just want a really nice bright white to hit those final highlights on there. And we're going to hit a lot here on the top. I'm liking them. It's a little different than the other ones that I made. Of course, they're all a little bit different. They all are. This is what he's going to look like with the holly leaf. And the last thing that I did was just put the smallest amount of this terracotta here on the cheek. And it gave him a little bit of a happy glow. Like this. Nice. Okay, so to finish him off, like I said, I did paint the back, and you could just go ahead and use the gray. You could use, just a color that, so it doesn't look like the resin here on the back. But before I painted the back, I actually had these little jewelry bales that I ordered off of Amazon. And I also used some E6000, and I glued this little jewelry bale on the back with the E6000. I'm not going to show that here because it takes a really long time for that to dry. So I actually, before I painted the back, because I feel like it sticks better to the resin than to the thin layer of paint. So I went ahead and applied a generous amount of E6000 and left that to dry overnight. And then once it's all the way dry, I came back in with, I used a black mixed with a little bit of white. Like I said, it doesn't really matter. You just want something uniform on the back. Painted that whole back. Then I used some hot glue, glued on the holly leaf. It's going to look like this. Then I used just this thin gold ribbon. This is from Hobby Lobby. It's 1/8 inch ribbon. And you could use anything that you want, but I just added that for my hanger, and there you have it. Your sheep should look close to that. I mean, like I said, they always look different, but I'm going to get that finished up and mail that to my Aunt Linda and wish her well. So thank you so much for joining me today. I really, really appreciate all of your support. Watching, liking, sharing, following. Those are all free ways that you can support our small business, and we appreciate it so much. So if you do know someone who might enjoy watching me paint these molds, or maybe using this technique yourself, please share it with them. Please visit us at harmonyvintagedecor.com. You can order this sheep mold there. This one, like I said, this one is retired. It's no longer available, but the sheep mold is still very much available. So if you'd like to order one, we do ship the next available shipping day. That's our commitment, is to ship as quickly as possible so that you can get your supplies and start crafting.